And that's where we start. The ANC Secretary-General saying that former President Jacob Zuma has done nothing wrong and will not call him to order. Recently, the former president wrote to the Chairperson, Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, informing him that he won't give evidence at the State Capture Commission. Political parties have expressed different views to the former president's decision not to appear before that commission. By doing this, the former president defied a constitutional court order which forces him to appear before the Zondo Commission. The commission also then responded, saying it'll open a criminal complaint against the former president. Let's unpack this now. CASAC Executive Secretary Lawson Naidoo and political analyst Professor Lesiba Teffo join me now. Gentlemen, a very good evening to you. Thanks indeed for your time. Mr. Naidoo, let me start with you. So let me first get your reaction, to the utterances this afternoon of the ANC Secretary-General Magashule, throwing his weight behind the former President Jacob Zuma. He believes that Mr. Zuma has done nothing wrong in defying the Constitutional Court.
Well, Griselda, one is flabbergasted when one has heard that. Nobody has the right to defy a court order, let alone an order of the Constitutional Court, the highest court in our country, that has made a very clear decision to say to Mr. Zuma that he is under a legal obligation to go to the Zondo Commission and to answer questions that arise at that commission. The Constitutional Court judgment itself says that Mr. Zuma is at the very center of these allegations and that he has a duty to the nation as well as to himself to answer to the allegations that have been made against him. So it really is truly unbelievable that Mr. Magashule would say that Mr. Zuma has done nothing wrong and that it is within his rights to ignore an order of the Constitutional Court.
Mr. Naidoo, by the attitude of Mr. Zuma in refusing to go to the Commission, do you view this as another attempt by him to avoid accountability?
Indeed, that's what it is, and we've clearly seen the strategy insofar as it relates to the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. That when Mr. Zuma did go there in July of 2019, he made wide-ranging allegations against a range of people, some of which he said to withdraw subsequently because he made those on the basis of without any evidence. He has sought to deflect issues that point directly at him, and it's quite clear that he has no intention of accounting to the South African public through the Zondo Commission for the many, many wrongs that were done whilst he was President of the Republic, issues that have been spelled out in the former Public Protector's report on state capture, which places him at the very center of these allegations and which, in a sense, necessitated the establishment of this commission. And Mr. Zuma's behavior of the last few months, with bringing the application for the recusal of the Deputy Chief Justice, refusing walking out of the commission once that application had been rejected, and not turning up when he was summoned to do so last month, really shows him thumbing his nose at the Commission of Inquiry and at all South Africans, in fact, and at our democracy itself.
Prof. Teffo, good evening to you. Thanks indeed for joining us. I want to go back to the first point that I asked Mr. Naidoo about. You cannot underestimate the office and the voice of Ace Magashule. How is the utterances that he made earlier today going to be viewed? This is the engine of the African National Congress and, the engine of the governing party.
Face my response by saying, when graft becomes a way of life for a group of men in a society, with time they create a legal system to authorize it and a moral code to glorify it. I think that's where we are. When the person of the SG, the engine of the African National Congress, and indeed the one who should give guidance and whose voice cannot be underestimated, says the things that he has said, then you know that you are almost at a precipice. Because I'm saying this precisely because for the average Joe out there, the voice of the SG can be interpreted as a clarion call. It can be a call, a march to a certain direction that might have consequences unpalatable. For me and others, we can interpret it one way or another and even give him the benefit of the doubt that he's speaking in his personal capacity. But prudence at that level is required. I often say our politicians and our leaders should be mindful of their tongue, because certain things you cannot reverse. I think it was immensely regrettable, and to a greater extent, he might live to look back and say, I ought not to have said that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, well, typical of politicians, he might say, I've been misinterpreted, I've been misquoted, but it was an immensely regrettable statement, and even the tone that he used in expressing himself was immensely regrettable.
I don't think that leaves room for Mr. Magashule to say that he was misquoted, as that was all carried live, and it's going to be very difficult, I guess, would you find a situation, I'm very interested to know how this will unfold in the next couple of days, Professor, in that is this the view of Mr. Ace Magashule, or is this the view of Mr. Ace Magashule as the Secretary General of the African National Congress? Because it's going to be very difficult with, for example, someone like the President of the ANC speaking out against issues of corruption, and yet on the other hand, where you have someone who is as senior within the African National Congress who has been accused of all sorts of wrongdoing, does not take the opportunity to go and give their version of events at an inquiry that was set up by himself. What kind of conundrum does the ANC find itself in here in having to defend what the Secretary General has said?
It's a very prickly position in which they find themselves. How they are going to wiggle themselves out of it is not going to be easy, including the President himself. Look, let's not shy away from the fact that this has been in the making for quite some time, right? And that there is a defiance of the court order. It would be unfair to put it solely at the doorstep of Jacob Zuma.
Yeah.
Several cabinet ministers defied the court judgments, and we knew one day it would catch up with us as a society if we don't demand accountability. And we are at that stage. Right now, I think the top six, including the President, one way or another, they should have spoken, and they should speak at this juncture, especially the President, not against Zuma, not for Zuma, but at least give moral support to the Commission, state-owned enterprises, and indeed law enforcement agency. I miss the voice of the President, not in relation to this case in particular, but inadvertently, it would send a strong signal to say, let's respect the Commission and all state-owned enterprises. By the way, it was Jacob Zuma himself who told us, he implored us that I'm setting up this commission. I hope you are going to support it, and none of you is going to make it difficult for it to acquit and to execute its responsibilities.
Prof. Teffo, I'm going to come to you very shortly, Mr. Naidoo. Please bear with me. I mean, we're hearing some cries, take away his benefits. Is that even possible?
No, let's forget about that one. I think that is for people like me at the lower level who don't understand the law. There is no provision at law for that. Even if you were to try to go to Parliament and amend the Constitution, fine, but it won't work retrospectively. Another lesson to learn that says to you and me, when we make the law of the land, let's not make it for the individual, for the whole society. Mandela and his team, they were men and women of integrity, men and women of goodwill. They never thought 26 years down the line we'll find us here. When the storm shall have come down, let's amend the Electoral Act and make sure good men and women are elected. Let's amend also, right, the law that pertains to the conduct of retired heads of state, including how their benefits should be at least managed.
Mr. Naidoo, I'd like to hear your view on that one as well.
Well, look, I think it's within the realm of Parliament to take a decision to amend the benefits that accrue to former heads of state and former ministers and premiers, in fact. So that is a political decision that Parliament will have to take. I believe that it's within the power of Parliament to do that in terms of the Remuneration of Public Officials Act, and that is something that Parliament can consider in due course. I think that's a matter for due course. I think we're dealing with an issue now that needs to be addressed immediately, and I'd like to concur with what the Prof said. I think it's incumbent upon the African National Congress as a political organisation, as the ruling party, to distance itself from the comments, the very unfortunate comments that were made earlier today by Mr. Magashule. We cannot afford for people like that to be dismissing the Constitution and the rule of law in South Africa in such a manner without there being consequences. And, this is something that strikes at the very heart of our democratic foundations and cannot be tolerated.
Gentlemen, I wish we had more time. I'm told that we've actually gone just a little over. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. CASAC Executive Secretary Lawson Naidoo and political analyst Professor Lesiba Teffo. Thanks, gentlemen, for joining us here on The Full View.